All right, we're going to start with the Carob Rice Crispy treats. We're just going to get started on it, and then I'm going to move on to something else while it's being heated in the kitchen. Then when it's brought back, I'll show you the rest of the recipe, okay? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put 3/4 of a cup in a pot.
And that's 3/4 of a cup of honey, it looks like?
Pure honey. All right. And 1 cup of chunky, natural peanut butter.
There is a lot of that available nowadays. I've noticed at Walmart and Meijer and Costco that they have some very nice, healthy peanut butter that's just peanuts and salt or something like that.
This is just peanuts.
Did you make it yourself?
No, I didn't.
That's nice that you found that.
Yes.
Where did you find it?
I have a jar down here. I'll actually get it and I'll show it to you in just a minute.
All right.
All right. Natalie, it's just in the pot. She is going to heat it until it's warm. You don't bring it to a boil, but it'll be hot. And when she brings that out, then I will add the rest of the stuff. I'm in a mess. Now, the next thing we're going to go to are the croutons. And I like to make it with homemade bread. And so that's what I'm going to do.
It's not a surprise that your daughters seem to be excellent bread bakers.
Well, usually I cut it like this. This is a little loaf because I'm just showing you how to do it. So we'll just go ahead and do it like this anyway. Cut it kind of big, and then just in your squares.
Just like you'd dice an onion.
Yeah, it is. All right, so we're going to put this in there.
And you're using, I notice, a whole grain bread here.
Yes, it's a multi-grain.
Okay.
Yes. I'll wipe off my fingers.
They will be substantial and have a little bit of fiber to boot.
Yes. All right. So we're getting this all going here. My husband used to make lots. He used to be the bread maker, and he's not able to do it as much as he used to. So my daughter, Francie, has picked up on that, and she learned to let him teach her how to do it. And so now she makes homemade bread every Friday, and she brings it out to us, and we are so thankful to get the homemade bread.
Wow. And just the way that we're told that we can use a loaf of bread to bring joy in a really special way.
Exactly.
To a neighbor, to someone who's having a tough time or sick. What a wonderful gift.
All right, we cleaned that up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of olive oil, drizzle this. Not what I usually use, but we're going to see how this goes. That's probably more than it should have been. Whoops. We'll put some garlic powder, just a sprinkle. You can put salt on it if you want to, and then some Italian seasoning. And we're going to stir this up.
And if you're on a low salt diet, the salt in the bread would probably be sufficient to give it a nice taste, wouldn't it?
Exactly. I didn't put any on this one, but we could. I have some, but we're not going to. Now, the easy part about this is all you have to do on these croutons. Now, I'm going to put it in my air fryer.
That's a lovely twist on it.
And it's so easy.
Yes.
And you don't have to have it in one layer. Can everyone see?
Nice.
You just put it in there. Now, in my air fryer, I put it at 270. Let's see here. 270. And for 15 minutes. And when it's done, they're perfect. My daughter's air fryer, she puts it on 250 for 10 minutes, and they're perfect. So you may have to adjust the temperature and the time depending on your air fryer. And if you don't have one, you can always use your oven.
Mm-hmm.
But homemade croutons, I think, are so good.
So with the new recipe, I generally put it in half the time and take a look. To set my timer for half the time and take a look. That's what you'd have to do, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's it. Okay, I'm still waiting on my peanut butter and my
and honey.
honey to get warm. Let's see if it's coming. Oh, here it comes. We're ready. We're going to, while it's hot, we are going to add a cup of carob chips. Thank you. Now we're going to have to, I'm going to stir this to kind of get them mixed in a little bit so they'll melt just a little. Can you see at all? All right, we'll do the best we can here. All right.
You know, I've noticed anytime you use carob, if you add peanut butter, you just don't notice the difference.
Yeah. Oh, I did. Have any of you tried them yet? Have you tried the dessert yet? Yeah? All right. And we're using a cup of unsweetened coconut, so we'll stir that in.
It looks like it's desiccated, nice and fine.
Yeah. And then we're going to add 3 cups of Rice Krispies. Now, I used to use brown Rice Krispies, but I couldn't find them anywhere. I don't know what happened, so we're using regular Rice Krispies in this because evidently brown Rice Krispies
have been discontinued. Have you tried?
Have been discontinued.
Have you checked with Country Life?
Yes, I did. I drove all the way out there.
Because that used to be my source. I'm
Yes.
sad to hear it.
I drove all the way out there, and
it's time to go on Amazon.
Yeah. Now we're also going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla to this. Real vanilla, of course. Put that in there. All right, so we are done with that. We'll keep stirring this for just a minute, and then I'm going to show you how to put this in the pan, and it's so, well, I think it's really neat. I'll show you what I do. Stir this all up. Nope, I got it right here. All right, so now what I do is I take my parchment paper and I fold it in half. Make it longer like that. You want it longer on purpose. Put it down in there. Maybe some of you do this, but I think it's...
So you're just covering the bottom.
Oh!
And it looks like...
Sorry about that. I'm getting too excited up here. I'm having too much fun.
Oh.
All right.
Boy,
now,
anything to save dishwashing. I'm all ears for this one.
Wait till you see this. Okay. So now we've got this parchment paper in here, and you can reuse this parchment paper. Okay? So now we're going to put our carob mixture in this pan. Oh, I just love this. It's so good.
Are you noticing a theme with her cooking? These are simple recipes made with things we can pronounce.
So far. All right. So you push it down. I don't like hard recipes. All right. We'll push that down. All right. Now we have that all done. See? But this is what's so great. You just push that down. Push that down. There we go. Put it in the refrigerator. You probably have to put like a saucer or something on it. Okay, but then after it gets cold, you just take it out like this, put it on your cutting board, and cut away. And I prefer them when they're cold, so you might want to keep them in the refrigerator. They're good when they're at room temperature, but I think they're a little bit better when they come right out of the refrigerator. They seem more crunchy, and I like them that way. But you should try them both ways and see. You may like it the other better at room temperature. So that's it for the carob Rice Krispie treats. That doesn't take very long at all. All right. I think there is plenty of food. If you would like to go back and get seconds, you're welcome to go back and have more. I will continue on with another demo. The last one. It'll take me a minute to get everything out.
All right, so we're going for the zucchini rolls, if you're following along with your handouts. Zucchini roll-up.
Oh, you know what? I think we should have a bread drawing.
I think you're right.
I think so too, but
All right.
I can't touch anything.
We need somebody.
My hands are clean.
Annie, come up. I'm going to hold it up so you can't see who it is, and you pick one for us. Awesome. Thank you very much. Our lucky person going home with a loaf of homemade whole grain bread, am I right?
Yes.
Is Rhonda Gager. Come on up, Rhonda. I knew I'd hear a little squeal over that. I heard it back there. Come on up. You enjoy it. Come next month and tell us all about what you did with it, who you shared it with.
All right, we're going to continue on, and we're going to start with our zucchini roll-ups. How many of you liked the zucchini roll-ups? Can I see your hands? Oh, almost everybody. That's great.
Nice.
They're one of my very favorites. It's my oldest daughter's recipe. Now, the creamy stuff, of course, I told you that was from another recipe that she had used, but she developed the other one, and the family seems to really enjoy it when she makes that dish for us. All right, so the zucchini story. I called my son-in-law, who's a big farmer in Sodus, and I said, I need zucchini for a cooking class. Can I get some for me? Well, how many do you need? I said, I think I need 40. 40? Okay. Do you want little ones, medium, or large? I said, just medium ones. Well, how long do you want them? I go, I don't know. I just want a medium zucchini. Well, they come in all sizes. I go, I don't really care. Just get me some zucchini. Says, well, do you want small, medium, or large? I want the medium. Well, what size of medium? I go, just bring some zucchini, 40. It'll be fine. He goes, okay. I said, can you bring them over on Sunday for me? Well, when are you going to use them? I said, well, I'll probably make them on Monday, but the school's on Tuesday. He says, oh, you want to make sure they're really fresh? I'll bring them over on Monday for you. I said, okay. So Monday, I call him. I said, I'm just calling to remind you, I need that zucchini. He goes, yeah, they're out there picking it right now. I'll get it over there to you by noon. Okay. So sure enough, I said, oh, can I have some tomatoes too? And he says, how many do you want? I said, oh, about 12. How many? I said, 12. He said, all right, I'll see what I can find. So here he comes, at 12 o'clock noon, here he comes, a whole case of zucchini, perfect in every way.
Wow.
Medium, just like I wanted it, and a whole case of tomatoes. I was like, oh, wow. So I was all excited. So my oldest daughter was over there, and we got busy washing them and working on them. And she goes, where's the eggplant, Mom? I said, I didn't get any eggplant. I said, on your recipe, it says optional. And she goes, Mom, mark that optional off. It makes it taste a lot better. You have to mark the optional off. So please mark optional off on your recipe there. Rachel will be very happy if you do that. So I said, oh, no. She goes, call Todd to see if he can bring over some eggplant. So I called him and go, Todd, we need eggplant. Eggplant? How many do you need? I go, I don't know, 5 or 6, 2 or 3. I don't know, not very much. And he said, all right, I got to go pick it. And I said, okay. So I said, but you got to hurry. So he said, okay. So pretty soon, it wasn't very long, he comes over there and he's got a whole thing full, I think it was 10 or 12 eggplant. And I go, wow. He goes, is that the right size? I go, it's perfect. So we've got perfect fresh eggplant too.
Beautiful.
And tomatoes. Thanks to Todd. Anyway, these have been washed, just so you know. I'm going to show you how we slice these up because we start with these. And any of the ones that don't turn out when you have the scraps, you just put those in a bowl because we're going to cut those up in little tiny pieces and use that for the filling. So this is called a mandolin, and Rachel wasn't sure if she got it at Meijer's or on Amazon, but you can, you can get them anywhere. And she puts it on a 2. So we're going to. I had quite a time making sure that the back, you have to put pressure on the back or you won't get it. It won't be the same. Okay, so this is not one that you're going to use, but don't throw it away. We're going to use it for the filling, okay? So here we go. Let's see if I can do this next one. I should be able to do it. I did a whole bunch yesterday. A lot. Whoops.
Beautiful.
So they just cut up so nicely. See how pretty they are? And they're all just perfect.
And
all right.
And zucchini makes such a nice substitute for pasta.
Yes, it does. So did this seem filling? Yeah, it's a nice filling dinner, but it's really healthy for you.
So we decrease the carbs, and we increase the water intake and also the vitamin and nutrient intake.
So what we did is we sprayed this pan with olive oil. I have some olive oil right here. We sprayed the pan with olive oil. Whoops. And then we put all the zucchini on here. We fill the pan up, but I'm just doing it to show you so you'll know what to do. Sometimes I brush them with olive oil and then put a little bit of salt because that'll soften them when you put them in the oven. Put them in the oven at 400 degrees for 5 minutes and then take them out. They're pliable enough so that you can roll them. All right? We are through with that one. Then, yes, thank you. Put that there. We have our cauliflower. So that's the zucchini. That's how you get started on that. Now we're going to work on the white sauce. So this is, you use a half of a head. But I always double it because it's so good. You can save it, and later you can use it for lasagna, and it's really delicious. Instead of using cheese, use this white sauce. It's really good. So when you do your cauliflower, let's see here. Did that come out yet? Of course not. Of course not. Not tonight.
Cauliflower is being used in so many recipes nowadays, but what we're doing here is substituting the base of a cream sauce. So instead of cream or even cashews, which still give us a higher fat, but we're making the base.
It's going to have cashews also.
Oh, nice. Give us a little fat, but not the whole amount.
Exactly. So I'm trying to get this center out because I don't want that in there. Now, when you cook this, you're going to boil. Now, you're going to need to mark this down on your recipe. Put a little arrow, a little line from the cauliflower, and then underneath that is the nuts.
I was looking for the...
Here's my recipe. Okay. All right, so it's cashews on the top and then cauliflower. So put a little arrow, and then you're going to put boil together. Okay? So put those on the stove, bring them to a boil. As soon as they come to a boil, let it boil for 20 minutes. Now, your cauliflower is going to be all soft, and it's not the way you would want to eat cauliflower, but you need it that soft so it'll blend up nice and smooth. So when you cut this up for your recipe, you'll want to cut it in just big pieces. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or anything like that. You just cut it up. You'll put that in a pot. I'm putting it in here so you can see it. Then you'll put your 1.5 cups of raw cashews, and you're going to boil that for 20 minutes. Then you'll drain it. After you do that, you're going to put it in a nice blender, a strong one, and you'll put 1/4 of a cup of water, 3 tablespoons of olive oil, a little bit of salt. I think we put a half of a teaspoon. We put on the lower side when we made the recipe. Then add these that have been drained and blend it until it's really smooth. And when it's really, really smooth, oh, our croutons are all done. You will get this beautiful,
wow, so creamy,
white sauce, and it's just so creamy.
And when you
are you willing to taste it?
Of course
All right,
I am.
let me get a spoon. I have a spoon.
Whenever you use a vegetable along with the nuts, you get a much creamier sauce.
You ready?
I am set.
All right, let's try it. Maybe that's too big. You don't have to take that big.
Oh, I'm quite sure.
It's really
finish
good.
it. Oh my. It's so much creamier than just nuts, but it's got the richness of having some fat in it and delicious flavor.
It's really good.
It's very thick.
It's really good.
And yet it's light. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's really good.
Lots of things you could put it in. Put it in lasagna.
Yes.
Use it as a white sauce, anywhere you use a white sauce.
Yes,
And
in place of the cheese.
And once you have a concept like this, that you can use cashews and cauliflower together, then you can season it up all kinds of ways that you normally would a white sauce.
She's got some great ideas. If you do it with lasagna, you would put sauce on the bottom of your pan, then you'd put your cooked noodles, the cashew cream, and then grill some veggies and put on there. Put some sauce, noodles, cashew cream sauce, and then end up on the top with sauce. And then to make it look really pretty, don't spread that on there. Take a dollop and put it on each little thing. It'll look so pretty. So that's just another idea if you wanted to do that. But I really like the zucchini with it. All right, well, let's keep going. We've got the zucchini done, and we've got the white sauce done. Now we're going to do the vegetables, and then I'll show you how to put it together. We're moving right along.
You're doing great. And we're having fun doing it.
Everybody got enough to eat?
Feel free to just slip out and come right back if
you know
you'd
what?
like to get second.
Let's have another drawing. Why don't you draw 2?
Oh, I love
and I'll get this out
Who's
here.
going to help us? Are you going to help me again? All right. She's a student at my school, although way past my first grade classroom. All right. Al Bauman, come on up. All right, we want you to come back next time and let us know what you did with it. Did you eat it all yourself or did you share it with somebody? You are so welcome. All right, one more, my dear. Ron Keller, come on up. These ladies have been busy making something yummy for you.
All right.
I have a suspicion who you're going to share it with. I see her sitting right there. So welcome.
Oh, great. So now we're going to start on the vegetables, and we're going to saute these. But I want to show you how we're going to cut them just a little bit. I'll take one of these just to show you. You want them cut pretty thin, pretty small. Actually, when I do it, I put several on top of each other and then cut them, because otherwise you'll be here till next year. But if you put several on there, you can cut them, in these thin strips. We'll just do that much just to show you.
We make thin little French fries.
Mm-hmm. And then you don't want to cut them big. You want them little. See how little I'm doing it?
So I'm guessing we're wanting the flavors to mix very well.
Yes, you do. All right.
Nice.
So you're going to do this with all of your leftover zucchini. Cut them about that size. Then with your eggplant, you're going to peel it. And I use a potato peeler, and I peel it, and I cut it in circles, really thin, kind of like this. Put them on top of each other, and cut them just like I did here, really small. And then you're also going to want to do an onion and cut it really small. And then you want to do some of the whole mini bella mushrooms. You can use the regular kind, but these have a little bit different flavor and really good. I like these better. So you cut these up really, really small. Here's some that are washed, but I think you know how to cut those up small enough. Does anybody need to see me do it? Oh, good.
Do you include the stem or just the caps?
The whole thing.
Okay.
The whole thing. Use the whole mushroom. But be sure you wash them really, really good. Like individually wash them because they seem to need a little extra help. So don't just rinse them. Make sure you really wash those mushrooms.
They hide the dirt kind of under the little fins.
All right. So when you get all through, mix it all together. Here's what it'll look like. Can you see? All right. Then you're going to put this in a skillet with just a little bit of olive oil, and you're going to simmer it down until it's down, and this is going to look like this. This is your filling.
Looks wonderful. Okay? And congratulations. When I grow eggplant, you can never grow 3 or 4. You grow 30 to be picked at the same time.
Yes.
And you offer your neighbor zucchini. Oh, yes, thank you. Tomatoes. Oh, I'd love as many as you have. Eggplant, what do you do with it?
It's got a really nice flavor. It's really good. I was going to show this to you, too. After the, you want the cashews to be very soft, so when you blend them, that's why you boil it all together and then drain it. All right, and that's what it looks like. I had saved some out to show you what it looks like after it, and then you just put that in the blender and blend it till it's smooth. All right, so now we've got the zucchini all cut and it's all sautéed, and we have
the sauce is all ready to go.
We've got the sauces all ready. We have the filling all ready. All we have to do is fill our pan, and that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to take some, you can make your own sauce. This is just a marinara sauce. I like this one. It hasn't got any preservatives, and it doesn't have any sugar in it, so I like to use this one if I'm going to buy it. It's pretty good. Whoa. Okay. You want a generous amount in there, and I think I did really good with that generous. All right, so we're going to spread that in the pan. And I'm not going to fill this whole pan, but I'll do a couple of them to show you how it's going to look. All right.
You know, I was telling her earlier, I found a similar recipe on the internet, and it was so much more involved. This is really simple and quick. I think I'd be willing to try it again.
I think it's worth doing.
Yes.
All right, so now I did these yesterday, so we're going to see how this works. I always do them fresh, but we'll see how it turns out.
All right, so your assembly line is going to include several at a time.
Yes.
Nice.
All right, so we're going to put the white cream sauce on first. And you have to be careful because you'll get it all over the place. If you're not careful, you'll have it everywhere. And of course, I'm really careful. Not. I went through lots of plates. I'd have it all full. I go, okay, I'll put that in the dishwasher. And then I'd get out another clean one and I'd work on that. I go, okay, I put that in the dishwasher, get out another one. I don't know how many plates I had, but I had a lot of plates. I did the dishwasher last night with just plates in it. So you know I had a lot of...
Well, she's being very generous with that cream sauce.
Oh, it's so good.
And it's so nice. You can do it without feeling bad because it's low calorie,
it's so good.
high nutrient
And then we've got this yummy, yummy filling. Oh, it's so good. Okay, so we're going to put some of this on. Can everybody see okay? Okay. I don't want to have something in the way you can't see. All right, let's get this on here. All right. Oh, you know what else?
Oh, my. It just smells so good.
Oh, my house smelled wonderful yesterday. Oh, it was so good.
And adding the eggplant adds a nice soft texture, doesn't it, that you wouldn't get from just zucchini.
Now, I would usually start this way, but you can't see, so I'm going to try and do it this way, but that's backwards for me. I don't know if I can do it, but...
We believe in you.
All right. You want to do it loosely, not tight, okay? All right. So we're rolling it up, and then we gently pick it up and put it in our pan.
So we're laying it on its flat side.
See? Can y'all see? Okay. I did that one good. Let's see if I can do 2 in a row. 2 in a row. Here we go. Oh, I did it.
Beautiful.
Another one. And then we've got one more, and we'll finish out that row.
And because the ingredients don't mix, they stay kind of in their layers, you end up with just a beautiful swirl of all the different colors.
Now, what you're going to want to do, let me wipe my hands. I know I have gloves on, but I still don't like them like that. Let's wipe them on. There we go. Okay. So now we have this nice pan, and we're going to pretend it's all filled. You don't want to just pour spaghetti all over the top of it because you want to see it, and so it'll be really pretty. So you're just going to take a little bit. I think I better use a spoon. Oh, I've gone through all my spoons. All right.
You know what? With this
No, I'm going to do this.
Can't have a little piece of anything, can we? Okay. Oh, you've got it. Looks beautiful.
It's not perfect, but it's pretty good without a spoon.
It shouldn't look too perfect. It's supposed to look homemade.
All right, there you go. And you can put it in the refrigerator, cover it, put it in the refrigerator, and it's basically cooked, but you have to put it in the oven at 350 degrees until it starts bubbling. And that's all you have to do. That's the end of it. So it's really an easy recipe and fun to put together.
Yes. Would you recommend, if they're making it for the following day, to bake it and reheat, or to put it away like this and cook it at the time you're serving it?
I would put it away like this. Like when I make it for Sabbath, I'll make it on Friday, cover it, put it in the refrigerator, and then I just have it ready.
Bake it when you're ready to serve it.
Yeah, I just put it in, because it's basically already baked. So you just want, you aren't really baking it, you're just heating it until it's bubbly, okay? Yeah.
And probably careful not to put tin foil over it because of the tomato.
The tomato, or you can put parchment paper and then put the aluminum foil on it. You can do that too.
Okay.
Because I like to keep the aluminum foil on it. So put the parchment paper on and then the aluminum foil.
So you just don't want aluminum to touch it. You'll have little specks of aluminum in it.
That's true.
All your hard work the next morning.
Tonight we're going to talk about autoimmune disease. It's a little different than most of the other topics we've covered here, and it's unfortunately all too relevant to so many people. It's another one of those things that's autoimmune disease has become more and more common in recent decades, and I think there's a number of important reasons for that. But we're going to look tonight at just an introduction to what is autoimmune disease, and we're going to talk about the key things that trigger it, and then we're going to talk about natural means for treating autoimmune disease. Okay? So there actually are several hundred different autoimmune diseases. So we're not going to cover all of them, but we're going to talk about several specific ones, but more general principles. So on this side of the slide here, you see the organs of the immune system, which the primary ones are the bone marrow that makes the blood cells. We have the thymus. My professor in medical school called it Thymus University, because that's where the immune cells go to school to learn what they're supposed to do or not to do. Thing is, if they fail, then they're killed, and that's the end of it. So it's a pretty tough university. Then we have adenoids, tonsils, lymph nodes, and the spleen, which are all various conglomerations of tissue and immune cells that function kind of like filter. They filter out things that are tagged by the immune system, so whether that be bacteria or other proteins or things like that. And it lists the appendix here as well. That's one that's a little bit less well understood and probably less directly contributing to most of the autoimmune diseases. So the factors that contribute to autoimmune disease, there's heredity, certainly one. A significant percentage of autoimmune diseases do have some sort of identifiable genetic factor. And Dr. Kelly, last month, I know many of you were here last month, and perhaps some of you, maybe this is your first time, but Dr. Kelly mentioned a truism in lifestyle medicine, and that is that genetics loads the gun, but it's your lifestyle that pulls the trigger. And by that we mean for most things, genetics alone are not sufficient to cause the disease. It's a combination of your genes and the epigenetics that Dr. Kelly was talking about, and the lifestyle and environmental factors. And you put all of those together in a certain combination, and then it triggers the disease. So here we have heredity, white blood cells, lifestyle, hormone influence, and of course the hormonal system is a very complex system, and that itself is affected by genetics and lifestyle factors and environmental factors. And over on the right there's environmental factors. So, list of common autoimmune diseases. As I said, this is not a comprehensive list, but it's a list of common ones. So we have inflammatory bowel diseases. The two most common ones there are ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. And these cause ulcers and inflammation in the lining of the bowels. There's rheumatoid arthritis, which targets the joints, often primarily in the hands, but it can be other joints as well. Lupus. Lupus is known as a great imitator, and it's a disease that actually manifests in many different ways. It's fairly complicated, and I would guess that lupus is probably primarily responsible for having a whole specialty about rheumatology or immune disease. So between lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, those are the two kind of classic autoimmune diseases. And so lupus can cause everything from vasculitis in the brain and the kidneys to skin. The butterfly rash on the cheeks is a classic sign, and all sorts of other problems as well. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease in which the immune system attacks the cells in the pancreas that make insulin. And then when those are destroyed and then your body's not making insulin, then that's diabetes. So, excuse me. Multiple sclerosis and psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. Hashimoto's thyroiditis and Graves' disease. So these are two different types of thyroid disease, perhaps two of the most common ones. I think Hashimoto's is perhaps the most commonly diagnosed autoimmune disease. Although most clinicians actually don't treat it like an autoimmune disease. They just say, oh, you have low thyroid, so we're going to put you on some thyroid hormone, and there's really not much thought about actually reversing the cause of the problem. Sjogren's syndrome, in which the body, the immune system attacks salivary glands, among other things. That's a primary symptom. Celiac disease, which is another form of inflammatory bowel disease. Ankylosing spondylitis, and this one is most typically in the upper spine. Inflammation happens, and the spinal bones fuse together over a long period of time, and there's a lot of inflammation and pain. So these are some of the more common autoimmune diseases. This slide, you probably can't read it very well, but it's mainly just to remind me what I'm supposed to say. So this is a slide that tells us in some types of autoimmune disease, the immune system is targeting protein. So the main target of antibodies and the immune system is protein. And for a number of the types of autoimmune disease, the proteins are actually inside the cell. And so there's a process where the antibodies can move into the cells and connect with those proteins, or can identify what's inside the cells. And then there are a number of types of autoimmune disease where the immune system is attacking proteins that are on the surface, on the outside of the cell. And I won't go through all the lists of which ones are which. Here's a slide that tells us a little bit more about thyroid disease and autoimmunity with the thyroid. And in the case of the thyroid, you can actually have high or overactive thyroid or underactive thyroid. It's two different types of autoimmune disease, one affecting the receptor. So in the case of Graves' disease, you have the antibody that's binding to the thyroid cells in such a way that it activates the stimulating receptors that causes the thyroid to grow and to produce more hormone. And in the case of Hashimoto's disease, you have antibodies that are affecting the thyroid in such a way that it produces less hormone. But they're both autoimmune diseases. Here's a diagram or a drawing of a typical antibody. So antibodies are made by our immune system. The white blood cells make antibodies. And so this is a very typical one. There's the long chain, so these are chains of proteins, and there's two of them bound together, and then on each side of these ends there's also a light chain, and the combination of the long chain and the light chain produce this area right here that connects to or identifies something, some portion of a protein. So in this case here we have an antigen, which is what we call the protein that the antibody is made to identify. These proteins are much too large to be identified as a whole, generally, so they're identified by a few of the amino acid sequences or amino acids in the protein. I don't know if you remember your microbiology or biochemistry. Some of you, we have laboratory scientists out here, so yeah, you remember your biochemistry. Proteins are made from amino acids in long chains, and then they tend to fold in a certain way due to the chemical and atomic interactions between the various amino acids. So you end up with this thing that's a protein, and the sequence of the amino acids and how it's made in the cells determines how those things end up in their 3D final form. And some proteins actually, there's a long chain and they fold, and then the cellular machinery will snip out parts of it before the final product is released. So it's all somewhat complicated. So for the function of the antibodies, they just recognize a small portion of the protein, and so that's illustrated here by what we call the epitope, just a part of that larger protein. And so this epitope and the paratope match up. Okay, so, and that's partially determined by the physical conformation or the physical shape of it, and it's partially determined by the chemical interactions between the molecules. Do you have any question about that? And some of you are looking at me like, oh, yes. Yes, we are. That's why we're here. So I'll be getting to that momentarily. The question was, are we going to talk about lifestyle and how that relates to preventing or reversing autoimmune disease? Yes.
You were talking that genetics really. You were talking that genetics.
Yeah.
Don't mean as much as lifestyle, or both combined. So why is it somebody who can abuse their bodies and live forever almost, compared to somebody who's actually tried to take care of themselves, and then they, because their genes, aren't that great? I mean, what do you think what do you think the reason for that is?
The big reason for differences in how long people live?
Yeah, because if genetics don't really matter as much
that's not what I said.
But I mean, combined.
That's not what I said. So it's a combination of genetics and lifestyle and environmental factors. And there are some diseases that genetics is a primary determinant, but for the vast majority of diseases, genetics alone is not sufficient to cause the disease. You have to have the genetic predisposition plus a certain input into the system, which we call lifestyle factors, for that interaction to cause the disease. Okay?
So people like, for instance, that, take somebody like George Burns, that smoked forever, and he lived for like
yeah, he
100
lived a long
years old
time.
or something.
So he obviously had really good genetics.
So that's the only reason, pretty much. I mean, that the genes.
I don't know. I was not his
lifestyle.
doctor. I don't know much else about his lifestyle other than that he smoked and he lived a long time.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So here we have an illustration again of an antibody with this epitopes and a paratope. And here it illustrates how they fit together. So you can see, if this is the shape here, and this comes over here, I mean, it's not going to stick. It's not going to attach or be recognized as the right one that this antibody is trying to identify. Okay? And so now here's where we get to what creates the problems, and that is a concept called cross-reactivity. And that is certain proteins will have a sequence of amino acids that is the same as a portion of a different protein. If you can think of the sequence of amino acids or dozens or hundreds of amino acids, it's not too unlikely that you might have a repetition from one protein to another. And so sometimes you can get this cross-reactivity between different things. So for example here, and these are just examples, kind of imaginary, but you can see the various antigens, the epitopes here, and so this antibody, while maybe it was designed to identify this particular bad guy or bacteria or whatever, you'll notice over here there's a certain portion of that protein that's the same as part of this protein. So this antibody will react against this protein as well as that protein. And so that then can potentially create a problem. Now, our bodies, remember I said Thymus University is supposed to screen the parts of the immune system that make the antibodies, and if they're making antibodies to proteins that are native to our self, then those cells are eliminated. However, sometimes things go wrong. Have you ever noticed that in life? Sometimes things don't work out exactly the way it seems like they're supposed to. So I want you to imagine if, I said part of the job of the immune system is to protect our body. And you might think of our immune system is for our body what, if we were to combine the army, all the military and the border patrol, or well, they don't call it that anymore, ICE and the police all into one thing. And their job was just to get rid of bad guys, keep the invaders from coming in and taking over, get rid of the terrorists, right? So that's the idea. In our body, there's all sorts of things that come from the outside, the bacteria and the viruses and all these things that are not good for us. And so the immune system is supposed to kill those things before they can cause an infection. Does that make sense? Follow me so far? So now let's imagine that here in our community, we have a bad guy and the cops are looking for this guy right here. A gold-plated Rolls Royce, and the gentleman driving it is dressed like this. He has an AK-47 and a suicide vest, and he's driving around Berrien County looking for a target. And so the APB goes out. All units be on the lookout for a gold-plated Rolls Royce and a Middle Eastern-looking person that has a red scarf and an AK-47. How long do you think it would take to find somebody like that in Berrien County? It wouldn't take too long, right? Now, what if the terrorist, instead of driving a Rolls Royce and dressing up like a foreigner, what if the terrorist was, middle-aged white guy in jeans and a t-shirt driving a Ford F-150 pickup, and he's got a deer rifle in the back of behind the seat? Would that person be easy to find? Might there be some mistakes made by the police while they're looking for this person? There might be. Now, in fact, this happened in Southern California. I don't know if any of you remember or if you were paying attention, but when I lived in California, I'm trying to remember when. I should have looked this up. I don't remember when it was. It was probably 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. I don't know. There was a guy who was down in LA area who was killing cops and judges. You remember this guy? He had been in the Navy, I think. He knew something about tactics a little bit, and so he had a beef with the law enforcement, and so he killed several cops. Well, you can imagine the LA basin, they're looking for this guy. So the APB goes out. He was driving a Toyota pickup, and he was, I don't remember all the descriptions, but they were very anxious because he was targeting cops. So you can imagine how nervous the cops get when somebody's targeting cops. Like, they're very kind of twitchy. And I remember a few days into this, there was a shooting where a black Toyota pickup that matched the description pulled up to an intersection. Some cops saw it and just started shooting. Well, it turns out, I do remember this now. Okay, so the suspect was a middle-aged black man. The people driving the Toyota vehicle was two white females. Okay, but the thing was, the system was so anxious, and it was a black Toyota, so start shooting, right? It's not supposed to happen that way, but that's what happened. So in the particular case here, there would be a lot of traffic stop made on F-150 pickups, like, hey, I need to see your ID, step out of the vehicle, keep your hands where I can, like, there would be a lot of stuff going on, and it's very likely that somebody would get hurt that shouldn't be hurt. An innocent bystander or innocent person would be hurt. Thankfully, in that case in LA, the cops actually missed the people that, I don't know how they did it. Like, they shot up the whole vehicle, and the girls were fine, so thankfully. But anyway, so you understand what I'm talking about here. So now the same thing happens with our immune system. Sometimes the immune system sends out a signal like, hey, kill this protein, but there's not enough specificity, and there's this cross-reaction that happens. And so the classic example, I think the first one to really be understood was this. Does anybody recognize that? I think you're all done eating, thankfully, so. What is it? Yeah, it's tonsils. That's somebody with strep throat. Somebody's got strep throat, and you might know this already, but strep throat, what do you do if you have strep throat? You head on in, you get some antibiotics. And why do you do that? Well, it's because, not so much because you have the sore throat, although it seems like the antibiotics do help people to get better a little bit faster, but primarily to help prevent the secondary problem, which is rheumatic heart disease. And so in previous generations, prior to the use of antibiotics, there were a lot of people that would get strep throat, and then part of the strep bacterial coating has a protein that has part of that protein that's the same as part of the protein in the valves of the heart. And so for susceptible individuals, when they got strep throat, these antibodies would be made, and their body would attack the heart and actually destroy the valves of the heart. And depending on how severe it was, it could be fatal, or it might just be debilitating. And so we had people who would have rheumatic fever when they were a child, and they would just be disabled for their whole life. They couldn't really do anything because so much of their heart was working overtime to try to compensate for that. So that was the first one. I think that was really well worked out as to what the trigger was and how that happened. So now I'm going to shift to, we could go on and on and on talking about all the different types of autoimmune diseases, so I'm not going to do that. We're going to start talking about treatment options. So conventional treatments, does anybody know what's a conventional treatment for rheumatoid arthritis or whatever? Steroids, right. So typically the first thing is going to be non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, but then if you do have a serious flare-up or something, then the next thing is going to be steroids. Well, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, they're relatively safe, sort of. They're over the counter. You can go buy them. You know, pretty much any grocery store or pharmacy is going to have those available, and people take them fairly frequently for aches and pains. The more you take them, the more you risk side effects, and that can be problematic. So GI side effects, damage to kidneys and hearing and so forth. So steroids are very powerful immune suppressants. It's kind of like using a sledgehammer. Yeah, they work really well. So, you know, if you come into the office and you're having some sort of major immune flare-up of some kind, you're likely to get some steroids, and that's going to just turn down your immune system very quickly and very strongly. And for acute use in a bad situation, maybe that's okay. The problem is it doesn't actually do anything to reverse the disease process. It just downregulates the whole immune system. So that would be, you know, if we had a situation, oh man, I probably shouldn't say that. Okay, I'm not going to say that. I'll come up with a different illustration. You know, it's important to have an immune system. If you don't have a functioning immune system, what happens to you? You get sick. And so this is often what happens. People that are on steroids for long periods of time tend to get sick. They get all sorts of infections. They also have other serious problems such as gastrointestinal bleeding, ulcers, and things like that. and osteoporosis. So I actually had a patient a number of years ago who, she was a somewhat elderly lady when I met her. She was fairly resistant to lifestyle change, and she had tried all the other medicines, and the only medicine that worked for her arthritis was prednisone. And her arthritis was so bad that if she didn't take the prednisone, she had so much pain, she just laid in bed and wouldn't get out of bed because she was in so much pain. But if she took the prednisone, then she was able to get up and around, and she wasn't athletic or anything, but she could get up and take care of her house and herself. And so I had the conversation with her several times, like, this is not good. It's going to be a bad problem in the long run. And sure enough, probably 10 years after I met her, she died from complications of a hip fracture. Like, she rolled over in bed and broke her hip, and then ended up dying from it. So we knew that was going to happen because she was on those steroids she had been on them for a long time before I met her. So that's not good. That's not good. So there's been a lot of research toward more, this stands for disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs. And so this is more of a targeted approach. So there's a whole bunch of these now. Most of them are fairly expensive. And they don't turn down your entire immune system. They turn down parts of it here and there. So depending on which autoimmune disease you have, the specialist will try to pick the right DMARD to turn off that part of your immune system so that you still have some immune function and lower risk of those side effects. The problem is with these is, of course, it's still messing with your immune system. So you don't have a fully functional immune system, and they all have higher rates of complications from infections. So, for example, people are dying from pneumonia and things like that really shouldn't have, but they're on these medications. Now we get to answering your question. There's got to be a better way. So what's the lifestyle approach to this? Well, first thing is avoid toxins, and perhaps that's so obvious I don't need to say it, but I say it anyway. So toxins actually cause inflammation in the body, and they interfere with immune function. So particularly alcohol and tobacco, but pretty much any other kind of toxins you want to avoid. And this is one of the things with trying to get organic food, is avoiding some of the toxins that are out there, being careful of the products that you use in your house and so forth. The next thing is going to be nutrition. And I probably already just gave away the answer, but the immune system is reacting against proteins, and sometimes that's where the confusion comes about. What's the largest source of foreign protein in your body? It's the food that you eat. The food that you eat. Every day you eat a meal that has a lot more protein than any bacteria that snuck into your body that day. Right? The amount of bacterial proteins and the viral proteins are microscopic compared to all the food that we eat. So the first thing to do to kind of shut off the immune reactions or overreactions is fasting. And this can be partly due to not having those proteins coming in and directly stimulating the system, but also when you fast, your protein levels start to drop, and it triggers a kind of a remodeling of the immune system. And so there are places where people will use this as a primary method for putting autoimmune diseases into remission. And the recommended amount of fast varies from as little as 1 or 2 days up to, I've known some centers and some providers that will go up to probably 3 weeks of a fast. So typically that's going to be a supervised fast in a lifestyle treatment center somewhere where the physicians are supervising things. So fasting is a very good way to put immune diseases in general and autoimmune in particular into remission. But of course, that's not really sustainable, is it? You can only fast for so long, and then you either die or you start eating again. And so the next thing is this thing called fasting mimicking diets. And so there's been a lot of research on these recently with regard to autoimmune disease and cancer, because fasting is also good for treating cancer, often as an adjunct or additional treatment with chemotherapy or other treatment measures. So a fasting mimicking diet is a diet in which it's fasting mimicking because you're in a caloric deficit and the amount of the food is small, and it's typically whole food, plant-based type of diet. So whereas a typical diet for Americans might be 2,000 or 3,000 calories, fasting mimicking diets often are 500 to 1,000 calories, and usually they're prescribed by providers for certain conditions, certain types of foods in there. But the idea with this is it can be more continuous or it can be intermittent for people who are not trying to lose weight, but they are trying to get the benefits of fasting. So it's kind of like a partial intermittent fast, you might say. And then when we go back to a more long-term sustainable diet, it's going to be a plant-based, ideally whole food, plant-based diet. And so they said that the main source of protein in our bodies is our food. And if we think about the proteins that we eat, and this concern for cross-reactivity, which proteins that people eat are the most like the proteins that are already in our body? Think about that for a second. So if you were to pick protein from a tomato or protein from a chimpanzee, which one would be more like my own proteins? The chimpanzee protein would be more like human protein, right? And the tomato protein would be a lot less like human protein. And so we can actually kind of arrange a spectrum of protein of foods that people eat and say the ones that are most like humans are also probably the most likely to cause some sort of cross-reactivity. And it turns out that there's pretty good research to support that. So it makes sense from a physiologic and biochemistry standpoint, and we have clinical science that says, yeah, that's a real thing. So, we can have a spectrum from eating primates, monkeys and apes and things like that, to other mammals, to birds and fish. So fish probably being much less human-like proteins than pigs, for example. So if you're eating trout versus bacon, which one of those is going to be closer to humans? Well, it turns out the bacon is going to be a lot more similar protein-wise to humans. And then there's a big leap going from animals to plants, because human body proteins are very, very different than plants. There are a few little small exceptions, but as a general rule, there's a huge distinction between plant-based proteins and animal-based proteins. So there's just a ton of research on this, of switching from a diet that has animal protein to a vegan diet or plant-based diet that just has plant proteins. I think the original studies on this were done with rheumatoid arthritis, and dramatic improvements just from switching the diet. And then that's been shown also in lupus and in other autoimmune diseases. Question? The question is, would dairy have the same impact as meat? And the answer is sometimes. Okay, not always, but sometimes. And there's certainly that potential because dairy and eggs, you might ask the same question about eggs. The protein that's in there, those proteins are still more similar to humans than a lot of plant proteins, but they're also a lot different than actually eating the flesh of the animal. So that kind of probably fits in a more kind of an in-between category. And then it turns out we have lacto-ovo-vegetarians, right? That don't eat animals, but they eat meat and dairy products. And then we have the vegans that don't eat either one. So that's a good question. Now, part of this comes down to experimentation. Okay, so if you want, the simplest answer is just, well, be a vegan. Don't eat any animal products at all, and you're going to have a dramatic improvement.
Being a vegan, will it start to kick? How many days of being a vegan will it start to kick in?
Okay, that's a good question. And it probably depends on how you do it. So if you start with fasting and then going to a fasting mimicking diet, then that's going to happen pretty quickly. If you're just eating your regular diet, but you kind of substitute, you take out the bacon and you put in stripples, like the plant-based replacements for all of your animal proteins, then it probably takes a few weeks. And the results will vary from person to person, and some will be faster and some slower. I was going to say I had a patient once. I'm going to tell a couple of stories on this because this is like really important. So I had one lady who actually came to the dinner with a doctor in California when I was out there. She was a piano teacher, and she had rheumatoid arthritis. And it got so bad that she couldn't play. She had so much pain. So she went to the rheumatologist, and they put her on 3 different drugs. So she was on a steroid plus 2 DMARDs, and she still had a lot of inflammation and pain, could barely function. She was still trying to teach piano because that's what she did for a living. She was a little bit older, but she wasn't ready to retire. She was still very vigorous and engaged and wanted to live life. And she had been struggling with that for quite some time. And so one of her friends said, "Hey, you need to go talk to Dr. Hess." And so she did. She came in to see me, and I basically gave her the talk that I'm giving you. And she's like, "I'm willing to try anything." I'm like, "Okay, become a vegan. Try it." And I usually tell people try it for 30 days. Because I know if they try it for 30 days, that's a really good trial. And if it's not working in 30 days, then it's probably not going to work. No, but it did that with her, and she called me up less than 30 days later, and she said, "It's amazing. My pain is gone. The inflammation is gone. I can play the piano again." And she's like, "I want to get off my medications." And so we worked with her and her rheumatologist, and she ended up being able to get off of the steroids and one of the DMARDs and like a half dose of the other one. So when she got completely off, she would start having flare-ups. So she ended up, but I thought that was a huge win, that she was able to get off the steroids, get off the big doses, and get her quality of life back, which the rheumatologist had not been able to give her. So it was the lifestyle change, especially the nutritional change, that gave her back her quality of life and her ability to play the piano. So she was very happy about that. I had another guy, patient, who had ankylosing spondylitis, and so I think actually he came to see me because he heard what the other lady was talking about, how she got better, something like that. Anyway, he came to see me had ankylosing spondylitis. I did the same thing for him and told him he should be a vegan. And he's like, okay, I'll try it. And he did. He was a vegan, and his pain went away. He felt better. Inflammation was gone. And then I got a call from him probably 2 or 3 months later. He's like, Doc, my pain's back. I'm like, yeah? He's like, yeah. I just couldn't stand being a vegan, so I had a steak. And my pain came back the next day. And I was like, well, okay, now you know. He's like, I just can't be a vegan. I'm like, okay. Well, I mean, it's up to you. If you're gonna, like, you get to choose how much pain do you want to tolerate. So he would like be mostly vegan most of the time, but every once in a while he just couldn't have it. He had to have a steak, and then he'd have a flare-up, and he'd be in pain for a week or so. And then he needed to refill on his anti-inflammatory medications and stuff. And it's like, you know, everybody has to make their choices in life, right? But at least he knew there was a way that he could feel better. All right. Better move on before I get stuck telling too many stories. Oh, drink water. Drink water. You know you should drink water, right? I think of this kind of, it goes along with nutrition. We don't normally think of water as having any nutritive value. But it's really important for the body, for bodily function and for immune function. And I've seen, you know, as part of a treatment plan, so many people, and especially people with a more severe immune diseases, tend to be dehydrated. So especially with inflammatory bowel disease or things like Sjogren's disease and stuff like that. So drink water. You know how to tell if you're drinking enough water, right? Everybody know that? Your urine should be clear most of the time. That's pretty simple. I mean, it's more complicated if you're taking some kind of pills or supplements or something that color your urine, but generally speaking, it should be clear. All right, exercise. And I'm going to say walk 3 to 5 miles a day. And if you haven't been doing that for a while, you might want to start with shorter walks and gradually build up over time so you don't hurt yourself. But walking actually does a number of things that help to reduce inflammation and reduce the effects of autoimmune disease. And then several times a week, you should have some higher intensity exercise. And I'll get to that in a moment about why that's important. So, good nutrition, exercise, stress management. Does anybody here ever have any stress in their life? Thank you. There's 2 people. I'm so glad I'm not the only one. Oh, 3. 3 of us here have stress to deal with. The rest of you, I don't know. Maybe we'll have to have you guys come up here and tell us how you can be alive without having any stress. But anyway, so stress management is a real important thing. I see this over and over again when people get stressed out. And that, I think 30 years ago, I used to think this was silly. When people would come in with some kind of disease process, and they would say, well, you know, my granddaughter just went through a divorce, and now I have this rash all over, and it was triggered by that stress. And I used to think, like, really? Well, it's really true. Stress can trigger all sorts of other things. I don't think it's generally a primary cause, but it's part of that lifestyle, environmental factor thing. If you have a predisposition to a certain type of autoimmune disease, and stress comes along, and stress actually messes with our immune system, and we know this. That's one of the things that we found out during the recent unpleasantness with that viral thing that was going around, was that had a lot to do with stress. So if people got better sleep and managed their stress, they were less likely to get sick from it or die from it. So proactively solve problems. And it's easy to say, not always easy to do, but it's that's an important part of managing stress, being proactive, addressing the problems instead of just fuming and simmering and stewing about them all the time. Exercise. Just real quick, if you think about stress from a biologic or biochemical standpoint, what happens when you're under stress? You get a buildup of stress hormones. So let's just say that when you go home tonight, you drive in your driveway, you get out of the car, you're walking to the house, and this big mangy dog comes running up, growling and barking at you. What's going to happen? You'll get a little shot of adrenaline, right? Cortisol, your heart will start beating faster, and all of that. And then you will go into what we call fight or flight mode. Am I right? Some of you have experienced something like that before. You get in fight or flight mode, and you do that. You run or you fight. The interesting thing is that our bodies react in the same way to situations where fighting or running is not the right thing to do. So this happens to me sometimes when I go to the mail, get the mail, and I get a letter from an attorney. You get a little bit of a, and then it's just, they want records for somebody. It's like, okay, it's a problem, no problem. Or maybe if you get into an argument with your spouse, or maybe at work somebody dumps an extra project on you that you don't have time for. All of these things are stressful, and we get this fight or flight response, but we don't fight and we don't run away. We just Well, vigorous exercise is almost like running away or fighting for your life, and it actually helps to reset those stress hormones into more manageable levels. This is why when you get a good workout where you're working hard and you're sweating and breathing hard, afterwards you kind of feel kind of calm and peaceful. It's because it's helped to reset those stress hormones. So that's part of stress management. Deep breathing, I'm going to recommend that as part of stress management. So just taking a deep breath in and out. Don't make it complicated. Find some place where you can sit quietly for a few minutes and just breathe deeply. And that, the physiologic process of breathing, it's like a sigh. Have you ever let out a sigh because you're kind of stressed or frustrated or something? And we've all done that, haven't we? So it's actually the body's natural way of dealing with stress, and we can be intentional about that by deep breathing. It's almost like sighing on purpose repeatedly to help yourself to calm down. So try it. And then meditation. Now here's one where there's all sorts of ideas about meditation going around in the world, and we don't endorse all of those. I recommend what we would call an active meditation, so that is thinking about something good, not just as some people try to sit and think about nothing. That's really challenging, and also it's not really as good as thinking about something good. So I recommend nature observation, or perhaps some scripture or devotional material to read that and contemplate it and think about that, and let that be the meditation. Hydrotherapy. So the first thing is heat treatments. And I remember my grandmother who had arthritis, she had a paraffin bath that she would dip her hands in. Anybody remember that? Anybody else, you know what I'm talking about? I don't see them much anymore, but you can still buy them. They have them at Walmart. You can buy them. Yeah, so it's still a thing. It's just not as popular as it used to be. So that's not exactly hydrotherapy, but it's a heat treatment, and the heat actually helps to reduce the pain and improve the function. And so that's a very simple thing that you can do. You can do that either with paraffin wax, or you could even use hot water and just put your hands in the hot water, or whatever other body part that you're treating. Or if you do that, you want the water hot enough that the skin kind of pinks up, but you don't burn yourself, right? So you're getting that reaction. So it could be either localized or systemic. So systemic would be something like sitting in a hot tub or a sauna for a period of time. And in fact, I do recommend this on a basis at least once a week if you do have some kind of autoimmune disease, because this is very good for helping the body to detoxify. So being in a sauna or a hot tub and just sweating out, because some of the toxins go out through the kidneys, some go out through processed through the liver, and a lot of them go out through the skin in the sebaceous secretions from our skin. And so when you have a kind of low, moderate temperature sauna or hot tub treatment, you will sweat, you'll make more sebum, and you'll excrete a lot more of those toxins, which can be sometimes exacerbating autoimmune disease. Question? Either one is good. I have a preference for the old ways. So, and of course there's both back in long traditions. Probably steam sweat would be the main preference, but if you just have a dry sauna available, then use that. I could say the same thing. People will ask about, for example, the infrared versus a traditional, heat, wood or electric heat. And the infrared's probably not quite as good, but it's still valuable, I think. So I would suggest, the question is, how long should you be in this treatment? So that's going to depend somewhat on your other medical conditions. So I'm not prescribing any one thing for anybody, but generally speaking, probably the greatest benefit is going to be close to an hour with, like I said, that low to moderate temperature, but for a long period of time, so you're really, sweating out those toxins and so forth. And of course, you have to make sure that you hydrate during that as well. Then, contrast. So the simplest way of doing contrast is just in the shower. You take your regular hot shower, turn that over to cold, and there's a contrast between the hot and cold. Now, this actually works quite nicely, but it does exactly the opposite of the medications. So the medications that are prescribed down-regulate the immune system, but this contrast showers, or bath, or any kind of contrast treatments actually upregulate the immune system. And so, they work quite nicely. My theory is that when we upregulate the immune system and combined with these other things, the immune system actually becomes more precise and less likely to make those mistakes. So that's my theory. I don't know if it's been proven yet. So the contrast, you can do a contrast shower. Simple way, like it says, take a hot shower, you're nice and warm, turn that as far over to the cold as you can tolerate for 30 seconds to a minute, and then go back to the hot until you're nice and warm and hot again, and then another 30 seconds with the cold. And you could do that 2 or 3 times. You get that contrast. And that actually, I do this anytime I feel like I've been exposed to some infectious disease or I want to just boost my immune system. And so that's a good one. And then cold exposure. So this one is a little bit less popular until recently, actually. Now, have you seen this thing of people taking ice baths and all this stuff? It's really popular now among certain circles. So, and it appears that it actually significantly reduces inflammation, which is a common factor in autoimmune disease. So, I could probably give a whole lecture about that one topic and how to go about that, because it's not just something you're just going to go and just do that on a whim. You want to ease into it and kind of build yourself up to it. So the way I suggest starting out with that is just in your contrast shower. If you're doing, say, 2 contrasts, and you're getting out of the shower after that second, the cold, and then you scrub off with a towel, I don't know if you've ever done that before, but usually you feel pretty good at that point. So you can just add an extra few seconds. So week by week, just add an extra few seconds on the cold at the end and build yourself up to where you might have your little contrast at the beginning to make sure that you're not cold or chilled, but then build your tolerance for the cold over time so that you could take a 4 or 5 minute cold shower and get out and feel good about it. And so, like I said, there's probably more details there, but if you are having significant inflammation, that's something for you to look into more details on that. We're nearing the end here. Herbal treatments. So the thing with the herbal treatments and the supplements, they're not going to be the same for everybody necessarily. So these are some general ideas. So again, I'm not recommending specifically that you do all of these things, but if you do have autoimmune disease, these are some things to look into. So the first couple on this list here are things that I have seen really good results with my patients. So rosemary, 400 milligrams of the dried herb in a capsule form twice a day. It actually, for those that want to know, it induces apoptosis in upregulated T helper cells. So that's pretty cool. But it does it in a way that's natural and without really any side effects. It's a culinary herb. And it's non-toxic, and so in English what that means is those cells that are making the antibodies are told to go jump in the lake, and like they kill themselves. And then that gives your body a chance to make new cells, which if you've been changing your diet and exercise and all these other things, when those new cells are made, they're better educated than the old cells, and you don't have those grumpy old cells that want to kill everything. Does that make sense? Kind of, yeah. Okay. So rosmarinic acid, which is naturally occurring in rosemary. Essential oil, yeah, it's in the oil, I believe. I usually just recommend the whole herb, but a person could experiment with the essential oil and see if they get the same effect. Yeah, I had one patient who came through my metabolic mastery class, and somehow we got sidetracked on talking about this, and so she started trying this. She had rheumatoid arthritis for a lot of years and never got any help from the rheumatologist. She went to San Francisco to Chinatown. She went to a Chinese herbalist who made her this big special formula with all the Chinese herbs, and it worked for her. So she would go down there and she would spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on getting this and using it. She started taking the rosemary, and she said that worked better, and it hardly cost anything. So, like, oh, great. I mean, nothing against the Chinese herbs, but if this is better and cheaper, that's good. Next one, turmeric. We have a question.
Do you take it forever or just certain amount
of
time
a good question.
throughout your life? The rosemary.
Yeah, so we're talking about autoimmune disease and reversing that or putting it into remission, and everybody's different. So I don't know in any one person's case if they're going to need to take it forever or not. So typically what I do is I get them lined out with a whole month on a vegan diet, get them started on an exercise program, all the things that we've been talking about, and this herbal stuff and the supplements. And then after a period of time, if they're doing really well, then we start to one by one take away the supplements and the herbal things. Because generally speaking, you shouldn't have to be taking medicine forever. Okay, sometimes you have to. And so for some people, they just have to stay on the supplements and the herbs and things like that. And that's okay. But the only way we know is we start taking them away and then see if the person has a relapse or a flare-up of their condition, then we got to go back and add that on. And it's the same way with medication too, right? If you're taking a medicine to control your immune function and you're feeling better, then you know, well, am I better? Do I need to keep taking it? Well, you don't really know unless you stop it and see what happens. So, turmeric, I'm sure you've all heard of turmeric. It's been very popular probably the last 10 years. It does have really good anti-inflammatory properties. I've had some people that have had a preference for turmeric over all the other prescription pain medications and things for arthritis. So that's pretty impressive. How much? It depends on which formulation and what you're trying to treat and all that. So yeah, you have to experiment with that. Garlic, same thing. How much garlic? Well, I don't know. More. I like garlic, so yeah, it depends on whether your friends are going to eat it with you or not. Right? So garlic is also anti-inflammatory and tends to help reduce flare-ups. Oregon grape root. Now this is one that I used a lot where I lived before because this grew out in the woods and people could just go harvest it and make their own medicine. I don't think it grows around here, so you might have to order it. So that is specifically for gut inflammation. Is really good. You can get a similar effect from golden seal. Okay. Astragalus and ashwagandha, these are ones that I have not really personally had a lot of interaction with, but there's literature to support that they may be helpful. Licorice, that one you have to be careful because there are some things in licorice that might be toxic if you get too much. And so they do sell some forms in pharmacy that are processed to make them safer. Milk thistle, skullcap, and last of all, ginger, one of my favorite herbs. This is fun to grow and eat fresh, so I use it for that just because I like it. But it's also been shown to be anti-inflammatory. So those are probably the main herbs to think about as options. Now supplements, we're going to look at a shorter list here. Vitamin D3, directly anti-inflammatory. We heard a lot about that during COVID, and so a lot of people supplement that. NAC, 400 milligrams twice a day is the standard dosing. So NAC is a supplement. It's a naturally occurring substance, but it's purified and put in capsule form. And then the L-glutamine is a amino acid that is particularly important for gut function. One thing that I didn't cover was this whole thing about inflammatory or leaky gut syndrome. Has everybody heard of that? So this is a thing that happens where there's some inflammation that starts, and then that's when the protein can kind of get across from in your guts into the bloodstream. Because protein is supposed to be completely digested into amino acids and then taken into your bloodstream. But if you have inflammation in your gut, then the lining, because of that inflammation, gets a little bit loose and leaky in the sense that proteins can now pass through there. And I would say 20 years ago that was considered kind of a fringe alternative medicine theory, but there's been so much research now supporting that concept that it's, I don't know if all mainstream doctors would go with it, but a significant number of mainstream experts now are saying, yeah, that's a real thing and we need to address that. So these, particularly the NAC and the L-glutamine, help with gut function. And then resveratrol is an extraction from a plant that has some anti-inflammatory properties. This one I haven't personally used it with my patients, but it does have some research to say that it can be effective for some people. Okay, and that gets us now to, one more. This is kind of like a supplement, probiotic. So again, this is kind of targeted toward gut health and reducing that leaky gut inflammation. So this is what I recommend if you're going to take a probiotic: at least 20 billion colony-forming units twice a day, and you want some of each of these 3 different types of species, especially for autoimmune disease and gut dysfunction. So Saccharomyces boulardii, Bifidobacteria, and Lactobacillus. And then finally, it's our last section, mental or spiritual practices. And you might guess I would say this since we're in church here, but actually putting trust in God is part of a really healthy stress management program. If you realize that you don't have to worry about everything because God's already awake, so just let Him worry about that and choose to trust God. Practicing gratitude. And this is a whole area of research right now is psychoneuroimmunology. That's a big word, psychoneuroimmunology, and it's an area of specialization now of people studying how our thinking affects our nervous system and how our nervous system affects our immune system. And it's really dramatic, the effects there. And there's a lot of research about this. So the way that we think affects our immune function in surprising ways. So practicing gratitude and being intentional about that on a daily basis of thinking about what am I thankful for, and having an attitude of gratitude helps to improve immune function. And it's even been said that having an attitude of gratitude and praise will have a bigger effect on the health than anything else. So I don't know if there's any science to prove that or not, but it's accumulating science on the importance. And then along with practicing gratitude, I'm going to say forgive. And I have seen this personally in some of my patients. There's a high correspondence between autoimmune disease and people that have had emotional trauma. This goes back to where I started out with, not really thinking about stress being a factor, but it really is. So there's this correspondence between emotional trauma, particularly childhood trauma, and autoimmune disease. Well, it's not exclusive to childhood trauma. So we could do an entire series of seminars on forgiveness and how to do that, because it can be really hard when someone has purposely harmed you. Sometimes it's hard to actually forgive. But both our moral system and our scientific system have shown us that the practice of forgiveness has significant effects on our health for the good. Laugh. There's a gentleman, it's probably been 50 years ago now, who was diagnosed with a severe autoimmune disease. The doctors didn't really know how to treat it. He heard somewhere that laughter was the best medicine, and so Norman Cousins, you guys heard the name before? You might want to go read his article. So he decided that he was going to laugh every day for at least half an hour. He insisted that the nurses read him jokes and play sitcoms for him and comedies and all sorts of things. And so he started laughing, for a long period of time every day, and indeed he got better. And there's some debate about how much that had to do with it, but evidence has shown that there actually is a link there. So the more you laugh, the better your immune function. We can actually measure that. So make sure you have a good laugh every day. And then finally, that's it. That's it. We came to the end. Hey, there's the list of all the categories of things. And here's a picture, just because I just came back from California. I was speaking out at Ukiah, California, in the redwoods, and so that's a picture of the redwoods for you.